Alright, this is my trip to Eve as a narrated slideshow. It started from the Circumnavigate Eve challenge on the Kerbal Space Program forums, and I decided to complete it with TAC life support. The aim of the challenge is to go to Eve, circumnavigate it with a Kethane jet, and that's it. But I wanted to go there with life support. I wanted to, be thorough about it and like make sure all the Kerbals came back and use it with the original 3 Kerbals, Jeb, Bill, and Bob. So it all starts with this launch. This is the Kethane scanner in a fairing, and you can see that I'm using, liquid fuel jets here just to keep it small. So this heads over to Eve. I didn't really take any pictures of the launch, but this is just a little ion ship that aerobrakes in Eve's atmosphere, collects some interesting data with the Graphitron 2000 along the way. Somehow that got demoted from 3000. And now it's in orbit, just hanging out, scanning Kethane. I didn't scan the whole planet, I just scanned enough to know where the patches are. They're pretty obvious boundaries. So the next step was to design some other ships. Before sending the Kerbals out to Eve, I want to populate it with the necessary equipment. One piece of equipment is going to be a Kethane refilling cart that's capable of drilling Kethane, and that can move on its own and has a socket for a cast plug. So that's what I came up with here. This is the cart itself is outlined right here, and this part around it is the interplanetary drive, which actually has a tremendous amount of delta V, way more than I needed, about 3,000. I only need about 1 to get to Eve, but I overbuilt it just because it looks cool, and it comes apart in an interesting way. And thanks to the procedural fairings mod for making me give me such a cool looking thing here. This just looks like a Falcon Heavy, and I like to launch everything in a ship like this. So that aerobrakes in Eve's atmosphere. This is just the first test flight. I actually send 3 more of these later, but the first one aerobrakes into Eve's atmosphere and lands in, just wherever it lands. Or excuse me, I did land it on a Kethane deposit. And just tests out to make sure that angled drill can drill Kethane, and it can. So that just sits there. The next thing to launch is the plane, and I designed this Kethane plane by actually testing it with full Kethane stuff on Kerbin. It doesn't have quite enough lift, but on Eve it has plenty of lift. So I had a lot of trouble launching it on a rocket because, of the wings on the top of a rocket problem, so I decided to just launch it as a plane. I built a little bit of a space plane out of it and launched it from the runway. Just flew it straight up, typical space plane trajectory till the liquid fuel ran out. You can see the only liquid fuel I brought was these little tiny Stratus V cylindrified tanks. And it just ditches those wings and switches to the nuclear engine, but it takes a lot of the fuel, about half of the fuel in that nuclear engine stage to get to orbit with this thing. So you can see I'm only at 1435 right now on my velocity. So what I did later was I sent up a small manned craft with a cast plug to operate the winch right here that's on that ship and refuel it for its Eve journey. Then I just left it in orbit. I'm going to put some more things in orbit now. This is my Eve ascent vehicle. There it is with the fairing off and an interplanetary drive stage. It's I later determined that was too small and I sent another one, but anyway, the transfer window is for the next transfer window for Eve arrived, and I sent the plane and 3 of those fill carts and that Eve ascender. So in this picture, the plane is the pod icon, the Eve ascender is the lander icon, and the 3 fill carts are these probe icons because I was too lazy to change them. So here they all are coming into Eve. They're all targeted for a 60-kilometer aerobrake, and they're all timed so that I have plenty of time to aerobrake one before the next one needs any adjustments. I unfortunately didn't capture any picture of these ships aerobraking and landing on Eve. Each of the 4 fill carts landed on a Kethane deposit, and the other things all landed at the same place. But I was live streaming when this happened, so I actually forgot to take screenshots. But anyway, somewhere along the way I determined that the Eve ascender that I sent is actually too small, and I designed a new one. So this is that new vehicle. And this vehicle is going to travel to Eve on the same window as the crew. This is my new Eve Ascent vehicle. This is a test prototype that only has 6 Kethane engines, and this helped me to determine how many Kethane engines would be needed for a thrust level sufficient on the surface of Eve to lift the fuel in the liquid-fueled stage. And it turns out 6 isn't enough, but 9 was enough, so my final design has 9. I also learned from this how to launch something that has a Kethane engine first stage. The Kethane engines gradually spool up, and if you just let them gradually spool up, for some reason they don't all spool up evenly, so you'll end up tipping over. Or maybe it's just that being neutrally buoyant for a second, makes your craft unstable or something, but for whatever reason, if you let them spool up, they tip over, even with ASAS on and plenty of control authority. So what I found I needed to do was find a way of instantly activating them at full thrust, and what I found worked was to actually disable spool them up to full throttle, then disable the Kethane tank, which they're feeding off of, and then after about a minute, and I know they're spooled up internally, I re-enable that tank and they start immediately at full throttle. It's a little bit of an exploit, but I wasn't able to launch without it, so I feel kind of like it's a bug workaround or something. Anyway, this is a test launch from that, learning how to fly that thing. So the next thing I launched was, this is the Eve Ascender's launch vehicle. Because it's so skinny and it has a nice thin profile, I can put it in a fairing and launch it with 3-meter tanks. This is what it looks like all boxed up in the fairing, which I thought was great because it looks like a vibrator, and I thought it would be funny to aero brake this in Eve, but I actually wanted to take the cover off just to make sure that everything was proper and properly set up, fuel was draining properly. This interplanetary engine actually drains only fuel from the Eve Ascender. So it drains all the fuel from the Eve Ascender, and that Eve Ascender gets refueled on Eve. So here it is without the fairing in space with the interplanetary drive engine. I brought plenty of monopropellant because it's damn near impossible to turn without monopropellant. It doesn't have any reaction control wheels. This is the crewed stage vehicle. There's a crewed interplanetary vehicle. It has life support supplies for, I think, maybe 1,000 days on orbit. Enough for a couple of Eve windows. So it's going up into orbit with Bill, Bob, and Jeb on it. And during that same window, I forgot to take some screenshots here, but during that same window, I sent this habitat module. And this is actually what Jeb and Bill were supposed to descend to the Eve surface in, but I forgot to put them in it. So I just landed it on Eve during the approach of these 3 vehicles. Just landed it right there, and it's empty. So that's kind of stupid. Here's the Eve Ascender 2 aerobraking into position. It didn't manage to land very close to the other vehicles, but that's alright. I just landed where it landed it. It's within 10 kilometers. It's perfectly drivable distance. And opened the panels, just kind of got it ready and left it there in case it ran out of power. This is the interplanetary vehicle aerobraking into Eve on the same window. It aerobrakes into Eve orbit, and then it hung out there for about 260 days, enough for 1 Eve window, and used up only about 1/5 of the life support supplies. While I designed and launched another vehicle, which you can see on the right, which I'm actually using. I'm using extra fuel. This vehicle was to bring a cart for Bill and Jeb to ride around in. Right now, I think Bob's in orbit. Bob's on EVA. That's why. Yeah, he's up here. That's why he's not showing up as a portrait. And it brought fuel to refuel this interplanetary stage because it turns out it was kind of low. And it's going to be the vehicle which Bill and Jeb travel to the surface in, because I already landed that habitat module. So anyway, Bill and Jeb both EVA over that, and I left Bob in orbit, and they descend to the surface of Eve to the general location of all this equipment, where they're going to start their journey. This is a view from the inside of that cool cockpit. Those are, I think, Firespitter cockpits. Just 2 side by side to make a 2-man cart. So the first thing they do is they go and inspect the habitat, because the habitat is going to have the life support supplies in it to... it's going to be where Bill lives. Jeb's going to fly around the planet in the plane, and Bill's going to stay in this habitat. And it's got the life support supplies. So the first thing we're doing here is just inspecting it and making sure it landed all right, checking it out. It's where he's going to live. Then we hop back in the cart and drive over to check out the other equipment. Here's the plane, the insufficient ascender, which is now just kind of scrap, to be used however I see fit, and the fill cart. Because of the way the symmetry works, it doesn't actually mirror the other part. It just puts it on the other side of the craft. The hatch is blocked. So it turned out I needed CrewManifest to get both crew members out, but that's no big deal. So I've got an interesting situation with this little bit of equipment here. The plane, this is the fill cart, and the plane is the only thing that has a winch. Everything has winch sockets, but the plane is the only thing that has a winch. So what I wanted to do was not only fill the plane up with Kethane, I wanted to fill this second ascender up with Kethane, and I wanted to relocate everything. I want to relocate the plane, the fill cart, the Jeep, the Habitat Trigun, and the second Eve Ascender all to the large Eve Ascender, because it has 3 winches, and that would give me a lot more flexibility with moving things around. So I grab the winch from the plane, hook it up to the fill cart, and I fill up the plane with Kethane, because that's the most important thing. That's a central mission goal, to actually have this plane full of Kethane to fly around. So even if I fuck everything up, from now on I can at least fly that plane. So the plane then transfers some Kethane, about 300 units out of 3,000, over to this second Eve Ascender, because this Eve Ascender, once it's completely empty, which I will empty it of liquid fuel, is capable of hovering on its Kethane jets alone. It has 2 of them. And I'm going to use that to hover it all the way, the 10 kilometers over to the other one. So Jeb just repacks the chutes on it, just in case I screw up and I have to parachute drop it. I can at least open the chutes and it'll land safely under no power at all. And then I take off using the liquid fuel first, because it's not light enough while it still has liquid fuel to take off on Kethane alone. So I burn that off first, and once that's empty, I can actually hover on Kethane, and that'll last a long time. So I flew it over here, and I landed it next to my other Eve Ascender, because this thing has three whatevers, winches. Then I drive Bill over there. Jeb's in the plane. And I decided then I wanted to try and move this habitat, because this is where the life support supplies are for Bill, and he could drive there and stay there and then drive back, but it's a long drive, so I wanted to see if I could move it. It has a winch, too, which is useful. So what I did was I took the plane over there, and I decided, this is probably a pretty stupid thing to do, to risk my plane to do this, but I repacked the chute on this thing and decided I was going to hook up a winch to it and then try and take off and like airdrop it. So I hooked the winch up and I got my plane in position and took off. But then, thankfully I didn't break the winch on my plane. I ended up blowing something up on the habitat, but I didn't break the winch on the plane. So I was kind of thankful for that, and then decided not to screw around with that thing anymore. I just left it where it was. So I flew my plane over to, by the way, this plane flies really nicely in Eve's atmosphere. I flew my plane over there. I landed just outside loading range of the Ascender, and just drove this cart over there to fill it up with fuel. I learned that these carts, I learned by quick saving, that these carts can only connect to something, they can only disconnect twice, and then they become undrivable. Because the first time I disconnect, the CAS plug shifts the part it's attached to down through some clipping parts, and then when I disconnect again, the part clips through the ground, and if I move the ship after that, it explodes. So I only get 2 connections with these, which was unfortunate, but anyway, I learned that what I needed to do is instead drive it over here, connect it to this monstrosity of parts here, and start filling this whole thing up with Kethane. I temporarily turned liquid fuel and oxidizer into all vessel resources so that I could fill this, and that just changed them back. So, yeah, I just fill up this thing and get ready to park. I'd park Bill near it, and there's life support supplies in this cart here, so Bill can actually just stay in his cockpit. I realized for the, if you can see, I got food tack. I got 24 days here, so that's plenty. They're just tucking in for the night. Jeb just flies over there and decides to join the party so that he can fill up on Kethane without having to spend another one of the fill cart's attachment chances. You can see how the converter, that's the part that the cast plug is attached to, has sunk. Once I disconnect it again, it will clip through the ground and explode if I move the cart. So anyway, that thing's spent. So Jeb connects up to this party and spends the night, gets filled up on Kethane. And the next morning, got to disconnect, pack up, get ready to go. One of the things I needed to do before taking off was move a bunch of stuff around. I hadn't discovered yet that you could actually dump things with tac fuel balancer, so I just took all the waste that had been generated thus far and dumped it all in the unused cockpit pod, which was the only thing that could hold it. So you can see it's 75% full of Bill and Jeb's shit. And I took life support from the fill cart, which has 2 life support canisters, and I moved life support into both of the pods on the cart and Bill's plane, or Jeb's plane. Got everything ready to go, disconnected, full of Kethane, and got ready to head to the first destination, midday too, so I wouldn't run out of sunlight. So here we are taking off. Getting started on the main mission goal of circumnavigating Eve. Our destination is 1/4 of the way around the planet. Should be fairly easy. I made the destinations just progressively a little bit longer as I go around. They're not all 1/4. This one's quite a bit less than 1/4. But I slowly tested like what kind of height would be optimal for flying at by dividing my surface speed by my surface speed in meters per second by my Kethane consumption in liters per second to obtain my fuel economy, which is in meters per liter of Kethane. So this wasn't very good. This was about 100, maybe 120 meters per liter of Kethane at this altitude. I eventually found out that flying at 26,000 feet with the autopilot is pretty efficient. If I go higher, I'm worried the Kethane engine might flame out. But up here I was getting around, you can see my Kethane consumption is 0.95 liters per second. So up here I'm basically getting 410, 420 meters per liter of Kethane. And when the ship's full, it kind of has to fly with a high angle of attack, and it's not that fast. It's 400 meters per second. But as it empties out, it speeds up considerably, and I didn't notice that, and I was just cruising at 27,000, going really fast. I think I peaked, according to F3, at about 460 meters per second when the Kethane engine burned out. Its ability to pull in air depends on speed, so I burned it out. You can see my throttle's down at 0. So I burned it out, and it won't restart until your airspeed drops below 80. But luckily, my destination is right here up on this isthmus. Yeah, it's a little spit of land. So it wasn't any trouble. I had plenty of Kethane, or I could have just glided there. But anyway, I got the engine restarted, cruised down there nice and fast, and connected to the fill cart. Started filling up. Everything went okay. It looked like this cart also displayed the same problem of only having 2 fill opportunities. And I also learned the hard way through quick saving that I have to extend this cable. The process goes like this. I have to connect. I have to run the cable over there, extend the winch, connect, reload, extend the winch, reload, pump, extend the winch, disconnect, reload, retract the winch, and lock it. And that's what it takes to actually fill this thing up with Kethane without blowing anything up. CAS has a lot of bugs, but it is extremely useful. But anyway, I got the thing filled up. Climb back in, get ready to take off. The next, we start here, and the next destination is a fair bit further around the planet, traveling over a lot of interesting terrain, a lot of lakes and islands and archipelagos, and craters and seas, and so I think this is a landlocked sea too. It's actually a giant lake. So we get ready for that journey, take off. Having already discovered what the optimal cruising altitude is, I just decided to go straight up to it. No need to carefully test altitudes. I just climbed directly at like 45 degrees up to 26,000 feet and cruised there. So it started to get dark as I was coming towards my destination. You can see here I'm getting empty on fuel, and I'm cruising at about 429 meters per second, which is near my top speed. And it started to get real dark, but I came in within range of the target without running out of fuel, landed with my headlights on, and I realized that the sun was setting on the wrong side of the planet, and I had actually caught up with the Dawn Terminator. Eve spins slowly enough that flying at 400 and some odd meters per second, you'll actually catch up with the Dawn Terminator, instead of, like on Kerbin, when you fly in an airplane on Kerbin, typically the Dusk Terminator catches up with you. But anyway, on Eve, it's the other way around. So I caught up with the Dawn Terminator and realized I didn't actually have to wait through the night, spend more life support to, get around to the daytime side so I could have some extended sunlight to operate my Kethane equipment. I just waited about an hour until dawn came again and ran my Kethane, filled up, and got ready for another flight. So I took off, climbed back up to 26,000, and started cruising for the next destination, which is also a little bit more than a quarter of a way around the planet. But I didn't wait long enough, so I just ended up catching up with the Dawn Terminator again. But it made for some really cool shots, so I feel like I got this really cool picture, which I'm very proud of. But it has a white pixel here. I don't know what the fuck that's doing there. I'll black it out. You probably can't see that with the YouTube compression anyway. The picture will be for download in the description. So I landed with my lights, fill cart. That should say fill cart 3. It's fill cart 1. Anyway, it's the third fill cart. I'm going retrograde around the planet, by the way. That's why I caught up with the Dawn Terminator. At this point, I discovered you can dump waste. So I dumped a great big pile of it here at Eve. I had plenty of life support, but I realized the cockpit was just filling up with waste. So I didn't know what to do because I didn't have anywhere to put it. It's not like I have a tank I can put it in and drop. But anyway, I discovered with TAC fuel balancer that I could just dump it. So we fill up Kethane, get started. Final leg of journey. I actually did this the next day. It was pretty scenic. I really optimized my cruising speed this time. I found that I actually need to cruise a bit lower, because with that high angle of attack, I can actually achieve a greater speed while my tanks are full by flying a little bit lower, and then climb up to peak at about 27,000, and then climb back down. Because, and here I am at like the halfway point, more than halfway done with my fuel, but also speeding up considerably. And my destination's over there in the red. I had really optimized my flying speed this time, and this time I think I achieved my max speed. But as you can see, it's not at a very high altitude. I'm at 24.8 kilometers, but I'm going 452.4 meters per second, and this is my highest efficiency. It wasn't 500 meters per liter of Kethane, but it was really close. So this point, I'm very empty on Kethane. I've got 63 liters out of 3,000, and my destination is over there on that far shore of the sea. And you can't land in an ocean, even though there is Kethane under this ocean. I really wanted to design an aircraft carrier for this mission, but I couldn't. So I just let it run out of Kethane. Achieved my record speed, my record efficiency. Had to slowly throttle down. You can see I set my cruising speed to 24.5 because if I actually fly any higher than this, I'll go too fast and burn the Kethane engine out. So I cruise down to my destination, get close. I use the smartass surf settings to hold it at an efficient glide, and I use this indicator, my prograde marker versus my target marker, to assess whether I was going to arrive at my destination in time at a given pitch. So I was tuning that and trying to find an optimal point where the green prograde marker would actually be just over the pink dot, which would mean that I would arrive at my destination with altitude to spare. So I did manage to do that. I managed to get there. I found that my optimal pitch was about negative 1.5 degrees, and then I arrived at the shore and landed just outside of loading distance of the Eve Ascender and crowd, because there's a lot of parts on that thing. So Bill Kerman gets in the car, drives out to see Jeb in his plane, which is called Motif, and rushes out to greet him after his circumnavigation of Eve. So they chit-chat, they jump in the car and start driving back to the Eve Ascender to go home. So back here, they wait until it's overhead and run to get in the Eve Ascender. They climb up, board the seats, set all the settings, and flip all the switches and turn all the knobs and get ready for their practiced Kethane ascent, which involves turning on all the Kethane engines, setting Smartass to surf pitch 90, and then turning off the Kethane tank, which is why I have it selected here, letting the engines throttle up for about 30 seconds, and then turning on RCS, and then enabling the Kethane tank, and it'll lift off at full power, and then suddenly it'll like kind of scarily right itself, and then start going straight up and fold the legs in. Well, it's kind of a hairy takeoff, but I practiced it on curb and I didn't screw it up. So I can't run these things at full throttle because 3 of them seem to overheat because they aren't connected with a long enough chain of parts to that one Kethane tank that everything's connected to. But anyway, I flew it at mostly full throttle. This is the engine pattern. You can see from the emissives that the ones in the center seem to overheat, but it wasn't a big deal. Got enough engines there to lift this thing. So these Kethane engines take me up pretty high. I think it was about 20,000 feet they got me up to. About 18,000 seems. And then I kick off the Kethane engine stage and immediately start the liquid fuel. And this is just a standard 6-booster asparagus stage liquid fueled launcher, but I underestimated how far those Kethane engines would get me, so I actually have a ton of delta V here. Starting 20,000 meters up, that saves a shitload of fuel. So this thing is now completely overbuilt and has a lot of fuel. Just proceeds like a normal Kethane launcher. It actually starts this gravity turn before it's even kicked off all those boosters, which I never expected. And somewhere along the way, I actually just completely by accident just ditched this whole stage, which had 1,500 meters per second of delta V, but due to a staging mishap, I just completely ditched it full of fuel. But anyway, I still had tons. I got to orbit here with several thousand meters per second of delta V left. There's like 1,000 in this stage, and 1,000 in this stage, and 1,000 in this stage. And got the orbit here around Eve and start rendezvousing with the interplanetary habitat. Still had plenty of fuel, so I was just totally lazy about it and did like a powered back and forth between killing relative speed and burning towards the target, and climbed everybody over into the interplanetary vehicle. So after waiting in orbit for their Eve to Kerbin transfer window, and just getting everything ready and dumping waste and making sure they got all their life support taken care of, they set off for home. Kiss Eve goodbye and admire the sunset on the way back. There's my trajectory. It's pretty efficient. It's nothing to brag about, but one of the interesting things is that if I didn't modify it, it would kick me out to Duna's orbit, which would have been fun if I wanted to spare the life support to do that. I had enough to do a flyby and then do a Duna flyby and then go back to Kerbin, but I didn't want to do it. So, just doing a little correction here, about 200 meter per second burn, and then we're in Kerbin's SOI, and I'm using McJeb here to target KSC. I'm not just telling it to land at KSC because I found it does a horrible job on hyperbolic orbits, but I just targeted it myself and lined it up. And one thing that I noticed I should do, without actually quick saving, I might add, before disconnecting the pod, was actually put some life support stuff in it. I've got plenty of life support in this vehicle, but none of it happens to be in the pod. So what I did was I dumped all of the waste and I transferred food, water, and oxygen and electric charge into the pod just to make sure that it had full supplies before I did this, couple of hours of aerobraking. So the pod's separated, and that's my heat shield on the bottom of it, and we're ready to go. So I'm coming in. McJeb excellently predicted that my exact landing spot on KSC, and I was very impressed with its accuracy. It's apparently optimized for Kerbin very well, but not the other planets. So here we are, aerobraking into KSC, coming down for what looks like could be an exciting landing on top of some building, and it looks like we may land on the roof, but we ended up coming down on the pavement. So here we are, safe back at KSC, right in our driveway, spaceplane hangar. Bill, Bob, and Jeb having done their mission, each one doing his part in circumnavigating Eve. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe or like button if you like this stuff. I'll be posting more. Thanks.